first thing I'd like to present is a medley of famous opera melodies, one written for baritone, one for tenor, one for alto, and one for soprano in French, German, and Italian. This is what I call classical music for everyone. Thank you very much. You already heard me say that I think classical music is for everyone. When I talk about classical, of course, I'm talking about not the period, the classical period, but about fine art, or art that stands the test of time, the root of the word classic. So I want to talk a little bit about why fine arts are important in education and brain development, and as we expand our boundaries of learning through fine arts, or achieve our deepest level of understanding. In both verbal and math tests, the College Entrance Examination Board reports students of arts continue to outperform their arts peers on the SAT. And Dr. James Catterall of UCLA has done a lot of amazing research about how the arts affect brain development. He even isolates which of the arts help in certain areas. So dance will help with creative thinking, and students of math are proven to have an improved skill. Students of music are proven to have an improved skill not only in math, but also in learning a second language. Dr. James Zull actually has the most interesting research, I think. A professor of biology at Case Western Reserve, he explains the neuroscience behind this phenomenon. Quote, "One thing we have found is that the brain physically changes when we learn, and that change is most extensive and powerful when emotion is part of the learning. In some cases, such changes do not even occur unless the emotion chemicals and structures in the brain are engaged. So the important idea then is that the arts trigger emotion." So I want to take a little bit of time here to make a side note about why music is not a language. Music has a really unique ability to touch us and evoke emotion, and it's very individual. And that's what's special about music and about art. So I sang that piece, and someone right there might be moved to tears, and the person right next to her is filled with joy. And so the important idea is that it's evoking an emotion. But when you call music a language, you're expecting that music is able to communicate in a specific way, and so therefore you're demeaning music by saying that it's not a good language. So if Hannah pulls out her viola and plays a beautiful musical line, she can't tell you, go to the refrigerator and get me a beer, please. But she can evoke emotion in a very special and unique way. So I talked a little bit about why music and fine arts are important in education and brain development, obviously in aesthetic development, and just plain enjoyment of life. But there's something about enjoyment of art that has to do with experience, exposure, recognition, or even ownership. And so the obvious example I can give right now is the moment when you recognize those pieces I just sang for you. That's what I call the aha moment, when you connected really clearly with that art. Maybe you agree that classical music is for everyone, but where do we start with teaching it? And that's where I come back to, to classical all the time when it comes to the arts. I was able to develop a healthy foundation, a structure, and a basis, which in 1602, Giulio Caccini was the first person who actually wrote about singing in his book. Well, it was called The New Music at the time. But his writing is the basis for our bel canto, or classical operatic style of singing today. And so in that style, we work to develop an evenness between the low voice and the high voice, which is called the chest voice, and the head voice, which all adults possess. I have quite a range, I think, because I started with a technique and a foundation in the classical world as a boy soprano. And so when my voice changed, I kept those high notes. There's a reason why Alicia Keys and Kylie Minogue are hiring an operatic singer, Ron Anderson, from our backyard in Palm Beach Gardens to accompany them on tour, to keep them healthy. And isn't this maybe the same reason that football players are taking ballet, for posture, balance, and coordination? There are a lot of parallels, actually, between classical music and classical dance training. I gave the example, I think, when I was here before about So You Think You Can Dance. All of us have probably seen that show, and last season there was a guy who was an expert in hip-hop dance. And he was amazing at hip-hop, but really struggled when he tried to jump into modern or salsa. When you watch the classically trained dancer, they seem to jump from category and genre to genre, and even do the hip-hop at the same level as the hip-hop dancer. So there's a good example in dance. So now I want to kind of give you an example of what is my classically trained voice going to sound like as I jump into a different category. This is Journey, Open Arms.
Lying beside you here in the dark, feeling your heartbeat with mine. Softly you whisper, you're so sincere. How can our love be so blind? We sailed on together, we drifted apart, and here you are by my side.
So classically trained musicians are important even in popular music. Who's going to play in the orchestra on Mariah Carey's album, and who is going to orchestrate it and arrange it and produce it? People with degrees and advanced degrees in music, mostly. I want to talk a little bit about kind of structure, foundation, and training. And in the Baroque era, there was a real tradition of ornamentation which parallels jazz improvisation in our modern world. They have a lot in common. So the artist will practice making up a lot of variations in the privacy of their practice room and making a lot of mistakes and developing a vocabulary which will allow them to pick in the moment something spontaneously which gives a certain impression of making it up as they go along. You know, this is something that comes back to technique, practice, foundation. And another thing that Dr. Zull found was that changes and developments in synapses in the brain occur because of practice. If you hear Mariah Carey or Beyonce singing a lot of really quick notes, we call them licks or runs. In the classical world, we call it coloratura. Well, coloratura is coloratura. It takes a lot of practice, a good technique, and a good basis will help with that. So I think classical music is for everyone, but how do we support it in our culture with exposure and training and education? I personally want to dispel the idea that classical music is stuffy. Unfortunately, I think golf and classical music have something in common here, where there's a certain etiquette that drives people away and almost promotes the idea that it's an exclusive group. So I'm going to help you with one thing right now, and that is after today, if any of you have ever been to a classical performance and wondered when you were supposed to clap, you're not going to worry about that ever again. In a multi-movement work, it's customary to wait till the end of the last movement before you applaud, so as not to break the concentration of the performers, but also because the composer grouped those things together when they wrote them for a reason, so that your ear would be able to hear them as a group. So what you'll notice is, in a program that's carefully constructed, if I was doing a recital, I would have a group of songs, and I would physically put them together in a group. And so when you see that paragraph mark, that space, that's when you're supposed to clap. So hopefully you'll never worry about that again, if any of you ever did. I'm worried in our current world that we're undermining the system for education, training, and experts. In this digital age where people aren't paying for music, where we won't pay people to study this and go on to be experts. So even in the popular world where there are so many resources you would think, artists like Beyonce and Jennifer Lopez and Justin Timberlake are moving into film for this reason and away from music because people are expected to give their art away. Opera houses and symphonies are always struggling to keep their doors open, and school music programs are canceled because of budget cuts. And you know that we vote in our culture with dollars. And that's one of the reasons that I can get so many great organic foods now, because we all wanted that, and we paid a little extra for them. And now even Walmart and people like that are coming out with a brand that says, we want to be in this market because we demanded it. So when you go to Atlantic Classical Orchestra or Tom's Concert Series at St. Bernadette, or my Christmas program with soprano Loriana Colazzo, who's out there at the Lyric Theater, you're voting with your dollars for our success to continue as artists. Most artists in our culture are struggling. And most of the people I did my master's degree with have found another industry. They're not performing. Artists often donate their talent to charity causes, and they've been asked to do this. And to provide support for artists that use their art for community improvement, I founded Artists for a Cause, which is an organization that finds education, promotion, and pay opportunities for artists, depending on what level they're at, to use their art to make a difference in the world. I personally want to mentor in schools, and in the Boys and Girls Club, I'm getting involved here locally, but also on a national tour that I have next year with more than 50 dates. I'll be adding a program not too dissimilar to this, but also some masterclass one-on-ones with artists and students of music all over the country. Everyone needs heroes, and I'd like to leave you today by presenting some music by one of my heroes, who was an innovator. He had classical training, but he loved jazz and had some training there too. And his Hasidic music was where he identified with his religion. So he was able to really combine all three of those things to develop his own style. So now I'm going to present the three main characters from Leonard Bernstein's Candide. Candide is described as innocent, simple, pure, and a bastard.
Life is happiness indeed, mares to ride and books to read. Though of noble birth I'm not, I'm delighted with my lot. Though I've no distinctive features and I've no official mother, I love all my fellow creatures and the creatures love each other.
Candide is hopelessly in love with Cunegonde, the fairest and highest born maiden in the land.
Life is happiness indeed. I have everything I need. I am rich and unattached, and my beauty is unmatched. With the rose, my only rival, I'd admit to some frustration. What a pity its survival is of limited duration.
The Baron's son, Maximilian, is very sincerely devoted to himself.
Life is absolute perfection, as is true of my complexion. Every time I look and see me, I'm reminded life is dreamy. Although I do get tired being endlessly admired, people will go on about me. How could they go on without me? If the talk at times is vicious, that's the price you pay when you're delicious. Life is pleasant, life is simple. Oh my God, is that a pimple? No, it's just the odd reflection. Life and I are still perfection. I am everything I need. Life is happiness indeed.